Representative Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to first take a moment just to correct the record that my actual time as a designated defensive marksman and counter sniper was as a contractor with the U.S. State Department on a protective detail, not as a military sniper. While I was honored to serve as a combat veteran with the 82nd Airborne Division, I don't hold that permissibility in that billet. I want to talk today a little bit about what took place, but also what I see as the actual perimeter failures that has continued to be a recurring issue, whether that be in Butler, PA, or whether it be the most recent assassination attempt in Florida. But before I do that, I also want to take a moment just to recognize the loss of Corey Competore. His family deserves to continue to have the accountability research and also investigation into what actually caused the death of a father, a husband, and a family member. My thoughts and prayers remain with Corey Competore's family. I also want to look at what our findings have been, as both myself and my colleague and really close friend, Rep. Crane, has found. It is clear that Butler County, PA, as well as for the ESU teams and the Secret Service, had a failure in their overall coordination. That the perimeter establishment and the actual ownership belongs to that of the Secret Service, as well as for the failures on that day of July 13th in Butler, PA. We realize, as it's been mentioned earlier, that there was a breakdown in not only the misuse of any compatible communication capabilities, but also a lack of a joint operations center that could have allowed for each of the individual units to be able to communicate in a more efficient fashion that would have led to a faster response element. We also know that while there could have been potential drone capabilities that was being utilized, that the Secret Service themselves had actually refused to utilize those for their benefits, which also could have helped the counter snipers who were sitting in their positions. There was also a lack of coordination when it came to who was actually going to take over the position on the AGR building, where Butler understood the idea that it was the Secret Service who was responsible for the positioning, but yet the Secret Service failed to actually show up to the morning coordination meeting. While all of these repeated perimeter failures, whether it be the 150-meter shot that was taken by Thomas Crooks or the potential assailant that was looking at a 500-yard distance from Florida, the thing that we've established is that no one is looking at what is happening and going on with regards to the Secret Service's cultural issues. This is not a budgetary issue, and I want it to be clear that we cannot treat this as DC has continued to treat things, where we throw money at problems in hopes that it's actually going to cause that to be a solution. This breaks it down into three simple things. One is poor leadership of the United States Secret Service, whether that be under Director Cheadle or whether that be under Rowe. To quote Dan Bongino, who is actually a former Secret Service agent, he said that he does not feel any safer or better now than he did under Cheadle, having Rowe in the helm. I think leadership, as we can all admit to, whether it be in the military, the police force, or whether it be here in the House, leadership is one of the things that we must rely upon heavily, and there is a crisis in leadership. I also want to look at the fact that there is a prioritization across not just our military, but other departments and agencies to prioritize diversity, equity, inclusion under DEI, the meritocracy and readiness of our actual capabilities on the ground. But the further thing that I think is needing to be explored is the doctrine itself that is being utilized by the U.S. Secret Service. For too long, they've continued to go under a very specific and very understandable thing where whatever your title is that you hold results in the amount of resources and assets that are being allocated. This is a failure by any of us who understand security, or anyone who's even got a basic knowledge of security, that you must conduct the necessary threat analysis to determine the risk management matrix that then determines what the assets and resources that should be allocated. This is not as simple as saying that you're a former president and therefore there is a one-size-fits-all for Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, President Bush, or former President Donald J. Trump. We must acknowledge the fact that what we're looking at now is also the fact that so much time has passed and so much of the actual potential evidence has been destroyed or put away, that purposeful intent is now indistinguishable from criminal negligence. Having laid in the actual position where Thomas Crooks took the shot above and upon the AGR building, as well as having sat with Rep. Crane and ranged the position from the counter sniper teams where the alleged shot was taking place, this is something that should have been preventable and should have been known to the counter sniper teams. I want to also point out the fact that, as Rep. Crane discussed, I think that until the actual problem and the solution can be found for the Secret Service with the three key areas that I've talked about, that a private security detail who does not have any political agenda or affiliation to protect the president is what my recommendation would be to ensure that the inner core is basically protected at all times, utilizing his available Secret Service assets and resources to be pushed out further to allow that perimeter failure to be completed. I want to thank the task force for giving me the opportunity to actually testify before you. And I want to point out that when we're looking at the map that's behind you, Mr. Chairman, that it is not just the AGR building 150 yards away approximately that was the issue, but even if you look directly to the 12 o'clock of the stage, you have the Kubota dealership, which is only within about a 400-yard shot placement, which Rep. Crane and many snipers and counter snipers can tell you is a very feasible shot. When speaking to the Kubota dealer, we noted the fact that not a single Secret Service or local law enforcement agent had ever talked to that dealership to ask them whether or not they could put any snipers on the rooftop or whether or not they could actually utilize that as an overwatch position. If you look to what would be from my vantage point right now, which is the 3 o'clock, which would be the 9 o'clock for the president, that was the area that was actually the third counter sniper team that one of our whistleblowers, Ben Schaefer, had talked about from his vantage point and being able to see Thomas Crooks at an earlier time. Mr. Chairman, I point these things out to the committee, and again, to echo my good friend Representative Crane, I challenge you to continue to go forward and to not be feared away from the idea of being labeled a conspiracist by looking into every possible outcome, being able to look at every possible provided video, listen to every single testimony of each individual whistleblower. But I also pledge my continued support for the task force, as does Rep. Crane, to provide information, intel, and any of our findings to help further this investigation. While it is an independent investigation, I want you to know that it is not exclusive of the efforts in which you are taking, and that we are here to work together to try and find a solution to improve our Secret Service and to guarantee the protection of not just President Donald J. Trump, but any of the actual nominees on either side of the aisle. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I want to thank you both. Now, we